Welcome to the imagery section of the course. This is one of my absolute favourite sections of the course to teach, not just in close reading but in the folio in particular. I love seeing when students start to grasp the idea behind imagery, get confident with imagery and start creating their own images. At the start it can be quite daunting, so it's totally understandable if when you hear the likes of similes and metaphors you're really put off. But don't, bear with me. I'm hopefully, but in a few videos time you'll be really confident with this. So what is imagery? Well, sort of an easy definition for you to work with, but we're going to ignore it pretty quickly, is that it's a term, a word, used to describe similes, metaphors and personification. But I don't think that helps us beyond the very beginning of a question, knowing that we need to talk about similes and metaphors when we do an imagery question. My problem with the word imagery is that when people hear that word, they automatically think of these type of images, photographs. The world is full of images everywhere you look, the TV, Netflix, your phone, and in fact most images that we see are digital at the moment because we spend so much time on our phone. So when we think of images, we think of pictures, digital pictures, photographs, lots of different pictures. The problem with that is that those kind of pictures just record exactly what's in front of the camera. So if it's a picture of a car, like the second one down in the middle, it records it's a picture of a car. If it's a guy running through a river, like the one just a little bit below and to the right, it just records the guy walking through the river. It doesn't do what the imagery question is asking us to look at in close reading. Imagery, in terms of English, when you're in the subject English, sitting in the class in school doing your folios or doing your close reading, is actually to do with comparing. That's all it is. And if this idea drops, if this idea attaches itself properly today, and you really get to understand that imagery is just comparing two things, your life is going to get a whole lot easier in the English class. So we're going to look, this video is just going to look at this idea of comparing in detail, and the next video we're going to look at some examples. So what do I mean by a comparison? Well, I'll go back one. This picture here is a picture of somebody just comparing two apples. Maybe the one on the right is slightly wider, the one on the left is slightly narrower, maybe the one on the right is slightly heavier, maybe one looks a little bit better, one has a better stem, but they're actually very similar. In imagery, the comparisons we look at are more like this, and you're like, oh, what's that? Well, it's a horse chestnut seed or a conker and a leaf. Well, how can you compare these two things? Well, you can. On the surface, they're very different. When you look at them, they're completely different shapes. One is almost flat, one is much more three-dimensional. But there's a few ways in which they're similar. Look at the colour, for instance. They both carry that kind of like orangey brown. They're both located in the same place. They're found near trees. They're both related to autumn. So there are actually ways in which we can compare objects that when we first look at them look completely different. And this is the trick to imagery. So why do we do it? Why do writers create imagery? Why don't they just say things are what they are? Well, it's all to do with description. There's a limited number of things in the world, objects, okay? Tables, chairs, apples, leaves, whatever you want to introduce to your story or to your article that you're writing. However, there's an unlimited way to an unlimited amount of things that we can compare those objects to. So a sentence like this is very straightforward, right? It's factual. The hot air balloon floated in the sky. Now, of all the articles that have ever been written about hot air balloons and hot air ballooning, if writers were limited to this type of sentence, every article about hot air balloons would start to sound the same. There'd be no variety, and we need variety in our writing. We need variety in what we're reading. So we need to work on comparisons. Here's a hot air balloon, just in case you haven't seen one. I think I've only ever seen one in real life once or twice. I've seen lots of pictures of them, but I've very rarely seen them, and they were quite far away up in the sky when I did see them. But this is basically what it looks like, and you can see the basket underneath with the people in it. Now, if I want to make my description of the hot air balloon up in the sky more interesting, is there anything that I can compare it to? Can I compare it to something else in the world that will help elevate my description above the mundane, above the boring? Well, this is what writers do. They spend time with the things they're describing. And when you are doing your folio, I hope you're doing the same. that and the important words, the important objects or items that need to be described should be described carefully. And if I look at that now with my writer's hat on, I'm thinking, oh, it kind of looks almost heart-shaped. It almost looks like a heart. It looks like something dangling below the bottom of a heart. I think, okay, I could compare it to a heart maybe. But also, if I even look around the room that I'm in now, it kind of looks like a light bulb. And I was like, okay, but not really. Maybe it looked more like a heart than a light bulb. But what if I invert that light bulb? What if I turn it upside down? Let's do that right now. All of a sudden, I've got something that's I can compare a hot air balloon to. I can compare it to a light bulb. Now, they don't serve the same function. I can't fly in the sky in a light bulb. I can't really light up a room with a hot air balloon. But there are elements of both that are similar, particularly in terms of the shape. So, the sentence, the hot air balloon floated in the sky, can now become a more interesting description. Have a look at this. The hot air balloon floated in the sky like a colourful light bulb. All of a sudden, by using the word like, and the comparison, I've created a simile. So a simile is just comparing two things using the word as, like, or than. So I'm comparing a hot air balloon to a light bulb, and that description is so much better than the previous one. That previous one, have a look at it again. It's very dry. It's not showing off the skills of the writer at all. This one, however, with that little wonderful comparison in there, that wonderful imagery, elevates the standard of writing. And the SQA want you to be able to analyze these in your close reading. So, can I make the description even better? Can I improve upon that simile? Well, here's another image of a light bulb, but this one, instead of hanging in a room, is kind of floating there as if that's a magician's hand, and he's learned some trick to make it float above his hand. It looks really good. I'm going to kind of incorporate that idea of it being suspended above his hand into my simile. So don't they look quite similar? We've got the hot air balloon suddenly does look like a magician's light bulb that's suspended in the air. So I improve my simile like this. The hot air balloon seemed to hang in the air like a colourful light bulb suspended by an invisible wire. All of a sudden, my boring but factual, useful description has become wonderfully descriptive, all because I've created a simile, which is just imagery, which we now know is just a comparison. I've just compared the hot air balloon to something else that has some qualities that are similar. And if you look at it this way, you can see the two elements of the simile. The first section, the hot air balloon in purple, was there all along. That was the item that was in my article. That's the original element. I wanted to write about a hot air balloon. Maybe I was writing for a hot air balloon magazine or a feature article in a newspaper. I then introduced the light bulb. That's my introduced element, and that's the second element of my simile. So that's it. Imagery is just comparison. Now I'm going to show you a second example to help cement this idea. Okay. Let's take an example of a hang glider. Let's say the article I was writing about wasn't about hot air balloons, it was about a hang glider. What could I compare that hang glider? Now I know it's quite blurry. I'll show you a better picture in a moment. But if you were to pick an object to compare that hang glider to, something else, anything else in the world that you could compare that hang glider to improve the description. If you want to pause the video for 30 seconds and kind of stare at it until you get a really good idea, go for it. If this was your folio and you wanted to really come up with a wonderful description of a hang glider, what would you come up with? Okay, well, I had thoughts like this. I thought it looked kind of like a bird, and not just any bird, not a sparrow, it's a bit small. It does look a bit like a swallow to me, but I wanted something more noble, more majestic. And if I don't put something noble and majestic in, I end up with a sentence like this. The hang glider flew over the cliffs. That's fine. It's factual. It's okay. It's not a bad sentence, but it's not a great sentence. And that's what I'm looking for. And that's what I'm going to need to analyze in the close reading. Great sentences. So I look at it. I want to make it more noble, more majestic. I'm going to compare it to an eagle. Okay. I think that's a nice comparison. So how will that work in practice? I'm going to compare. There's a better picture of a hang glider for you now in the left-hand apple. The hang glider, you can see the pilot, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but they're suspended on a special kind of, it's like a sleeping bag, and they hang onto that metal bar, And if you look closely, I'll show you a bigger picture in a moment of that eagle. You can see it's got a fish in its talons. The talons are its claws, and it's a nice comparison. So the hang glider flew over the cliffs now becomes the hang glider flew over the cliffs, an enormous eagle clutching its human prey in its talons. Now, here I've created a metaphor. It's not a simile, it's still a comparison, so it's still imagery, but because I haven't used like, as, or than, it's a metaphor. I'm basically saying that they're almost the same thing, a hang glider and an eagle. Let's get a closer look. You can see now that that fish in the eagle's hands is being clutched by the eagle. It could drop it at some stage. It probably won't. It's got sharp claws, but you wouldn't want to be the fish. Likewise, a lot of people wouldn't want to be the person in the hang glider. Okay, I know. I think part of me thinks I'd enjoy it. Part of me thinks I'd be terrified. But you can imagine for a huge part of the population, that would be a scary enterprise. That would be a scary thing to do. So we've come up here with a nice, easy way of explaining what an image is. Imagery is just a comparison. Now, I can't go on forever and ever with this two apples image because it's too small, and when I put pictures onto the two apples, you can't see them, especially if you're on a phone. So I'm going to use the idea of boxes instead. Okay, now these boxes are only slightly bigger. Doesn't really help us because, again, if you're looking at this on a mobile phone, I'm going to wager that that's kind of hard to see. So I'm just going to use bigger boxes, right? Very simple line drawn boxes from now on when I talk about imagery to explain that we're just comparing. So instead of the apples, we've got in the left hand box we have the hang glider, which is our original element, and in the right hand box we have our eagle, which is our introduced element. And we know now that imagery is just comparing two things to make your description better. So from now on, when you hear that word imagery, I don't want you thinking about photographs or images that you see in advertisements or magazines or on your phone or on the internet. I want you to always think of that word comparing. Imagery, comparing, imagery, comparing, and it will keep you right. So imagery is simply a technique used by writers to improve descriptions by comparing. If you've got that nugget of an idea out of today's video, out of this video, you'll be well on your way to understanding imagery, and we're going to look at some worked examples in the next video. So all you need to remember, imagery equals comparing. Imagery equals comparing. And that way you'll be able to talk about similes and metaphors and personification very, very easily. And I'll see you in the next video.